What's up, y'all? MMA Outlaw back here with another video, and today we got every single fight to make after UFC Strickland versus Hernandez. You see every fighter on the screen with a blank box next to their name, and we are going to fill that box with their next opponent. And so, let's get right into it. And so, starting us off, we got the woman herself, Joselyne Edwards, coming off of a huge slam win against Nora Kanoll. Joselyne Edwards struggled a little bit early on in that fight. Nora Kanoll really had a strong boxing distance, hitting Joselyne Edwards with some power shots as Joselyne was coming forward, trying to put the pressure on. But then Joselyne Edwards got Nora Kanoll in that clinch, and it was wraps from there, hitting her with that big old slam. That big old slam dislocated a shoulder, maybe popped a collarbone. I'm not exactly sure what it was. But ultimately, Joselyne Edwards getting a second round submission, not making any call out that's too strong of any sorts. But you know who we're matching up Joselyne Edwards with? We're matching up Joselyne Edwards with Karol Rosa. And so we're going to match Joselyne Edwards up with Karol Rosa because Karol Rosa is also coming off of a huge decision win against Nora Kanoll. Karol Rosa is ranked number 9 in the women's bantamweight division. Joselyne Edwards was ranked 14 before taking on number 12, Nora Kanoll. Obviously, after beating Nora Kanoll, we can expect Joselyne Edwards to be somewhere in that 10 to 12 range. And Karol Rosa has been a fighter that has won one, lost one, lost one for a while. If I'm going back and I'm just looking at it real quick, I believe, Karol Rosa was lost to Aylin Perez, lost to Irene Aldana, but has had big wins over girls like Yana Santos, and many others throughout her career. And as you guys may know, this is actually a rematch. It's actually a rematch from Joselyne Edwards, one of Joselyne Edwards' first fights in the UFC. She fought Karol Rosa and lost a unanimous decision to Karol Rosa. And so this gives Joselyne Edwards the opportunity to, avenge one of those losses, come back, and really make a statement as, we don't see this type of run in the women's bantamweight division often. We have 4 wins in a row from Joselyne Edwards, all 4 by finish in the women's bantamweight division. We haven't seen stuff like this in a long, long time. And I'm really, really excited to see what Joselyne Edwards has for us and, keep watching her climb up the women's bantamweight rankings because, man, she looks really, really good recently. Moving onward, Puna. One of our max plays of the weekend, one of our best bets, Puna. Who will Puna be taking on next? Punahele Soriano with a big decision win over Ramiz Brahimaj, 29-28. Ramiz clearly fading late in the fight. Punahele Soriano putting it on him with that cardio, with that pressure, with a little bit of wrestling and a whole lot of strength and will. So who do we have Puna taking on next to keep this 4-fight winning streak going on at welterweight? We got the man himself, Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque taking on Punahele Soriano. I was playing around with giving my boy Punahele Soriano a top 15 matchup. I don't think he's quite there just yet, but 4 wins in a row at welterweight is absolutely huge for Punahele Soriano. Give him a big name in Vicente Luque. Should be a really entertaining fight, a really good scrap. Vicente Luque has lost a few in a row, has fallen himself out of the rankings, but still has the name value of potentially one of those ranked guys. And so for Puna's career, I think this really does wonders for him, and I think this is a winnable fight for Vicente Luque as well. I think Luque has been out there in some really difficult matchups recently after that brain bleed, fought Jeff Neal, has been in some really tough ones, and so I'd like to see this matchup get made. I really think this is a winnable fight for both guys, and if Punahele Soriano gets a 5th win in a row at welterweight after this one, then we give someone in the 10 to 15 range wins that one, then he's won 6 in a row, right? Then we give him somewhere in the 5 to 10 range, then he's won 7 in a row, get him somewhere in the 5 to championship level range. That would be 8 wins in a row, and that's Puna's path to the title. I think Puna is 4 wins away from the title shot. I do not think Punahele Soriano gets there, but I do think he would have a really fun scrap with Vicente Luque. Moving onward, we got Carlos Leal coming off of a big win against Chidi Bang Bang and Njokuani. And so Carlos Leal looked really, really clean on the feet, had that patented pressure style, throwing big hooks, really just piecing up Chidi for the majority of the fight. And it was very, very impressive. As we all know Chidi Bang Bang is a world-class kickboxer in his own right. And so very impressive from Carlos Leal. We now have Carlos Leal coming off of a win after taking a KO loss to Muslim Salikov. He's KO'd Alex Morono, had an interesting unanimous decision loss to Rinat Fakhretdinov. And so I think we need to see Carlos Leal in that fringe, 20 to 25-ish range in the rankings. And so I really do believe the perfect fight for my man Carlos Leal is someone who also had a really weird decision against Rinat Fakhretdinov, something that we've become accustomed to in Rinat Fakhretdinov fights. We got Nicholas Dalby. So Nicholas Dalby is a very strong welterweight fighter. He's coming off of a split decision win in his last fight. He's coming off of 2 losses before that. The split decision loss to Rinat Fakhretdinov. I think we all remember that crazy flatline KO where we saw Nicholas Dalby face first into the canvas against Randy Brown. Man, God, was that nasty. But, man, Nicholas Dalby's got that kind of pressure pace. He's got a very interesting stance. Has trained out of Thailand before, big Muay Thai guy. Has had a lot of knees, has had good fights against guys like Gabriel Bonfim, beat Muslim Salikov, who Carlos Leal lost to. And so I think this is a really good matchup. Really gets to see where both of these guys are at in their career. Nicholas Dalby is 41, getting on the older side. Does he still have what he had before when he KO'd Gabriel Bonfim, when he beat Muslim Salikov by UD? I really think Nicholas Dalby versus Carlos Leal would give us a great scrap for the fans, and then also it really allows us to see where both of these guys at in their career. And so moving up and onward to Jacobe Smith. He's coming off that huge win against Josiah, the hamster wheel, something like that. Crazy nickname. Coming off of a great first round knockout, piecing him up on the feet, look calm and composed. The American looking good while he does it. Who do we have next for him after this performance? I kind of want to see the All-American, my boy Jacobe Smith, on the White House card. I think we could see Jacobe Smith on the White House card, and let's just say I know Jacobe Smith called out Kevin Holland, but please, UFC, if you're listening to me, Hunter Campbell, Dana White, get me in the matchmaker's room. Do not put Jacobe Smith against Kevin Holland. We do not need to see him in a matchup of mediocrity. We want to keep moving Jacobe Smith onward. I know Kevin Holland's a big name, but who's a big name who also fought tonight? Maybe a little bit on a different schedule, but I think we want to save Jacobe Smith for the White House card. I do think Kevin Holland could be a viable matchup, but I want to be strategic with Jacobe Smith's career. And with that being said, I want to give Jacobe Smith a winnable matchup in Jeff Neal. Not that Kevin Holland is not a winnable matchup, but we just saw Jeff Hands of Steel Neal go out cold to the boy Uros Medic. And I really do believe that this is a proper step up for Jacobe Smith. We know Jeff Hands of Steel Neal has been in there with some killers in that welterweight division, has been in there with some killers. He's been in there with Luke A's. He's been in there. He's been KO'd by Prates. He's had some really difficult matchups. And so this is a huge step up in competition for Jacobe Smith. But I think it's a little bit more of a serious fight than Kevin Holland. And that's what I'm looking for from Jacobe Smith's career. Give me Jacobe Smith versus Jeff Neal at the White House. Please, UFC, if you're listening to me, tap into this fight. It would be incredible. Now moving up and onward, Serghei, the Polar Bear, Spivac, coming off of a huge win over Ante Delia. And so who do we want to match up with the Polar Bear, Serghei Spivac, after his big win? I'm looking upwards at the rankings. I don't like a Kuniev fight. I think Waldo Cortez Acosta gets matched up against Volkov. I think Gane is going to be fighting Pereira. I think Pavlovich versus Kuniev is probably the fight. And that doesn't leave very many guys. Almeida just got cut. We already saw him fight Ante Delia in this past fight and had a huge win. And so when I look upward, the only matchup that logically makes sense is the plotty man himself. If you know who I'm talking about, you do. Curtis Blades, Mr. Plod Forward himself, Mr. Go for the takedown, American wrestling versus that judo background from Serghei Spivac. I really think this could be a very interesting matchup, a matchup we haven't seen before in the heavyweight division. Try and shake things up a little bit. Curtis Blades, doesn't bring much to his fights. Is a pretty boring personality, and so is the Polar Bear. Maybe we can kind of shove this one on the bottom of a main card, give it a featured prelim or something. But man, we gotta fix the UFC heavyweight division, and don't worry, there will be a video on that soon. How the UFC can fix its problem, known as the heavyweight division. And so I think the first step to doing that is get these two boringer guys together. Let's have them scrap it out, and let's see the result. And so Serghei Spivac versus Curtis Blades, that's the next fight. Moving on and upward, Melquizael Costa with a huge win over number 14th ranked Dan Ige. Dan 100 grand, no longer 50K. Dan 100 grand Ige. So we'll see Melky Costa slide into probably about that 14 spot in the rankings, taking Dan Ige's spot when the matchmakers get together on Tuesday. And this was a really tough one for me. Melky Costa called out Diego Lopez. I do not like that call out from Melky. Man, Diego Lopez, what is he? He's ranked second in the featherweight division. I just don't think Melky Costa gets the upward mobility quite like that. He doesn't get some of that Dagestani privilege, as we like to say. And so I just think that's a little bit too far up the rankings for him. And so when I was thinking about these fights, I was thinking, he wanted to call out another Brazilian. And so I was thinking, maybe we match up him and Patricio Pitbull. But I think I'd like to see Pitbull against, maybe a younger prospect. And so someone who I think is a real good candidate for a bounce back fight and, would really provide Melky the opportunity to step it up a level in competition is number 7 ranked Arnold Allen. Now tell me this wouldn't be a scrap. Melky's kicks from the outside. We know Arnold Allen is all go all the time. We remember when Arnold Allen went Sonic mode on our boy Dan Hooker. Man, that fight was crazy. And what was Hooker ever doing at 145? That was wild. But Melky Costa versus Arnold Allen, that's the fight to make here at 145. It really doesn't make much sense to do anything else. Josh Emmett, Patricio Pitbull, Yusuf Zalal, Steve Garcia. These were the names being thrown out. I don't mind a Steve Garcia versus Melky Costa matchup, but I like this matchup a little bit better. It gives Arnold Allen the chance to right some of his wrongs, take a step down in competition, and hopefully get a big W for him and for Melky. It allows him to fight number 7 in the rankings, still moving upward. I think Melky was on a 5-fight win streak before this. Now he's on a 6-fight. If he beats Arnold Allen, he would be on a 7-fight win streak. Then we could give him one more. Someone like a Yair Rodriguez, a Lerone Murphy, an Aljamain Sterling. And if he won that fight, then we could propel Melky into a title shot. And so it's crazy to say, but with the right fights, Melquizael Costa is 2 fights away from a title fight, which is freaking insane. In the big 2-6, has really come into his own here over the last few fights. It's awesome to see Melky and that kicking game, that spinning back kick right to the dome on Dan Ige, taking on Arnold Allen here next. And then so, moving onward and upward, we got the main man, the doctor, Uros, the medic, coming off of a crazy KO of number 12 ranked Jeff Neal. Man, this fight was a banger. And you knew it was going to be one right when the matchup was made. You knew it was going to be fireworks. And Uros Medic was the first one to find that big left hand and put him out cold. Jeff Hands of Steel Neal slump, going limp on the canvas. And so when I was looking at the rankings, I was really struggling with this Uros Medic fight. I actually thought Gilbert Burns would have been a really good matchup, but we just saw Gilbert Burns will be in the main event against proper Mike Malott in Canada, in Vancouver or Winnipeg, Canada, one of the two. I believe. And then I know Uros Medic called out Leon Rocky Edwards, but I'm just not there on Uros quite yet. And I want to see two prospects get together and figure out who is the real prospect in the top 10. So I got Uros Medic, who will probably be ranked around, number 11, number 12 after this most recent victory, taking on number 10 ranked Gabriel Bonfim. One of the Bonfim brothers, the better one of the two. Gabriel Bonfim, ranked number 10 in the welterweight division. I know Uros Medic had an interesting a comment there for Islam that he's coming in the welterweight division is his. I'm not quite sure about that yet. I like to see Uros take a step up in the rankings, but I really like to see between these two prospects, which is the one who is going to take the big step forward. And then after we have this scrap, we can have one of these guys take on a Sean Brady, a Kamaru Usman, a Leon Edwards. I would really, really like to see Joaquin Buckley take on Leon Edwards. I think that would be a huge fight. And I was thinking, maybe we give Uros Medic just another good fight to get, another win under his belt. I was thinking, a Daniel Rodriguez. And then I was doing some research and I was digging the brain. I was like, something's up with D-Rod. I was going to give Uros Medic or Puna, one of the two, Daniel Rodriguez. And then I was like, I know something's up with Daniel Rodriguez. I did a little bit more research and I forgot Daniel Rodriguez is still in that jail in Mexico for a little bit of weed. Pray that my boy Daniel Rodriguez gets out of Mexican prison for that, because that's a harsh one right there. I don't know if we'll ever see D-Rod again in the UFC at this rate. And so I was going to do Uros Medic versus D-Rod, but I think Gabriel Bonfim versus Medic, this allows us to see, who's going to be the prospect of the welterweight division of that, kind of 15 to 10 rankings. And then whoever's the winner of this fight, we can really propel them forward. And, they can be 2 wins away from a big title shot against the champ and the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, Islam Makhachev. And then so we got to move on to the main event of the evening. We got Sean Strickland beating up Anthony Hernandez. Man, that was a great fight to watch. We saw Strickland really let it go, unlike we've seen Strickland do in the past. We're used to the little conserved Strickland. Oh, he got that Philly shell, jabbing away, throwing a right hand behind, just but everything straight down the middle. We saw some looping shots from Strickland, some big old meaty hooks, as Lucas Tracy MMA says, big old meaty hooks from Sean Strickland right there. He had a really, really strong performance, beating up Anthony Hernandez and really shutting him down, stopping the takedown, stopping the relentless pressure from Fluffy. And so after beating up Fluffy and hitting him with that knee to the solar plexus, it sent him to the shadow realm. My boy Fluffy crumbling down, not quite to the shadow realm, but who do we got for Sean Tarzan Strickland next? And so this one was difficult, right? Sean Strickland has had an interesting career here in the UFC. DDP is ranked 1 in that middleweight division. Strickland has lost to DDP twice. DDP just got worked by Khamzat. What is the deal with Khamzat? I just see all these rumors. He's going to 205. What's happening? And so let me tell you guys, I got some news. I know what's going on. Carlos Ulberg versus Yuri Prochazka will be held for the interim UFC light heavyweight championship of the world. Alex Poatan Pereira will be going up to challenge Cyril Gane for the interim heavyweight title of the world. The winner of that Cyril Gane-Alex Pereira fight, they will be taking on Tom Aspinall in a unification bout. Khamzat Chimaev is going up to 205 to take on the winner of Yuri Prochazka versus Carlos Ulberg. So where does that leave the middleweight division? We can't see Strickland DDP again. Can we throw DDP right back in there to another championship belt after we watched him get worked? It wasn't just any championship loss. He got worked by Khamzat, just absolute domination on the ground. And so I think we just got to take the fight that's right in front of us. And that fight right in front of us is a fight we may have already seen before. But we saw that fight with Sean Strickland on short notice at a catch weight limit of, I believe, 195 pounds. We might have even seen that fight at light heavyweight. But that fight that we want to see again at middleweight is Nasruddin Imavov versus Sean Tarzan Strickland for the vacant UFC middleweight belt. With all that's going on at middleweight, all that's going on at light heavyweight, and Alex Pereira and Khamzat Chimaev and the land of super fights and moving around in divisions, Sean Strickland has been a mainstay of this middleweight division. Strickland always on his game, always game to take a fight, always game to come in on 3 weeks notice and take on a guy like Imavov. And Strickland beat up Imavov the last time they went at it. But we've seen Imavov coming off of huge wins, KO Adesanya, beating up Caio Baralho. Just really, really good stuff that we've seen from the Frenchman Nasruddin Imavov. And so this fight, this is going to be a banger. This fight, while it may not have the hype, the buzz, it's like a Strickland versus Chimaev, watching this fight is going to be a very, very entertaining one. And so that is the matchups that we got for today. We're going to see Strickland take on Imavov for the vacant UFC middleweight belt. We're going to see Uros Medic take on Gabriel Bonfim. We're going to see Jacobe Smith take on Jeff Neal. We're going to see Joselyne Edwards take on Carl Rosa. We're going to see a whole lot of great fights that come from this event. And I'm just telling the UFC, Dana White, Hunter Campbell, if you're listening, tap in, make some of these matchups. I'm telling you, these will be certified bangers. These will get the UFC right. And now, after getting the UFC right with all of those matchups from this past evening, we move on to our favorite part of the episode, the UFC chopping block. Who is getting cut after this last event? We've seen some bad performances on this last event. People were calling it the most boring prelims we've seen in a while. One finish on 8 prelim fights. So, the age-old question, who's getting chopped? And so, we got 3 people here on the chopping block about to get cut from the UFC. And so, who do we have first? We got 3 fighters behind these white screens. Slowly, I'm going to delete these white screens and reveal the fighters that will be cut from the UFC. And so, who will be getting cut first? Miss Juliana Miller. I was talking about her in the intro. I was talking about her in my predictions video. What does Juliana Miller do? She comes forward with that chin high in the sky and those hands down, just begging, just asking to be hit, asking to be clipped. I'm honestly surprised Carly Judice didn't find the KO there. Juliana Miller does have some solid jiu-jitsu, was the winner of the Ultimate Fighter, but ultimately a 5-4 record overall, a 1-2 record outside of the Ultimate Fighter within the UFC. And to be honest, highly uncompetitive contest, looks like a less skilled fighter than her opponents in pretty much every single one of her matchups. And so, Juliana Miller, you have been chopped. You are on the chopping block. You are going to be cut from the UFC. And I need you guys to tap in late. I'm going to pull up a video of Juliana Miller and the crazy stuff that she was saying before her fight.
That is a doubter. How dare you? I cannot wait to prove you wrong. Seriously, so hard.
And so you can see from that video, Juliana Miller was talking kind of crazy. She said she saw, I didn't get the full clip in there. I couldn't find it on TikTok or Instagram, but she was saying, I'm a plus 600 underdog. I'm about to prove all of you guys wrong. It's so disrespectful. I had to cut out some of the cursing parts of it as well to keep it family friendly over here. But man, Juliana Miller was talking crazy about her fight against Carly Judice and the disrespect she was feeling. But Juliana Miller, I hope you don't feel too disrespected by being cut from the UFC. So, moving on from Juliana Miller, the next person who will be cut from the UFC is Luis Gurule. On the chopping block, Luis, you have been cut. After going 0-3 in the UFC, my God. My man, I actually like Luis Gurule. I was hoping that he had a good career, had a really big win on the Contender Series, but man, he has had some bad losses in the UFC. Juliana Miller herself was 1-3 in the UFC. Luis Gurile has been 0-3 in the UFC. Has not been able to be on the right side of a win or even a decision. He just lost to, Alden Correa, which we obviously just saw, getting pieced up at range. Lost to my little boy, the short Mexican fighter, Jesus Aguilar, a menace in the 125 division, always an underdog, always some great picks. Thinking back to Jesus Aguilar. But Luis Gurile took a loss to Jesus Aguilar on that UFC Noche card, at least after being cut from the UFC. He can say he fought on Noche UFC. And this, his first fight in the UFC, got KO'd. Maybe a little bit of foreshadowing here, got KO'd by Ode Osborne. So 0-3 in the UFC, 3 pretty bad losses. Alden Correa is pretty good, but Jesus Aguilar, Ode Osborne, not at all top-level flyweights in the UFC. And so, Luis Gurile, you have been chopped. You just got cut. And so, lastly, moving on to our final cut of the day, we got the one, the only, the foreshadowed in the last cut. Even though he KO'd Luis Gurile, we are going to cut Ode Osborne. Ode, see you later. You are on the chopping block. Ode has turned in some pretty entertaining fights for the UFC, but he's just been on the wrong side of those entertaining fights. Manel Kopp flying kneed Ode Osborne early. Ode Osborne had a solid win against CJ Vergara. He even had a split against Charles Johnson, which is a really impressive win. But we've seen him get KO'd by Manel Kopp. We've seen him get KO'd by Tyson Nam. We've seen him lose to Asu Almabayev, to Jafael Filho, to Ronaldo Rodriguez, to Steve Urseg, to Albia Idris in this last fight, with the only big win in his last 5 coming against Luis Gurile. So in a 1-5 record in your last 6 in the UFC with many finished losses, we are going to have to chop you, Ode Osborne, from the UFC. So these 3 fighters have been cut from the UFC on the chopping block. There were a few other names that I thought of. I decided to be nice and give the Fresh Prince, Phil Rowe, another opportunity to fight here in the UFC because he's coming off of that split decision loss against Jean Paul. But I was thinking about potentially cutting Phil Rowe, but man, he just missed the chopping block. And so that'll do it all for today's video. I hope you all really enjoyed the chopping block. I hope you guys enjoyed making the matchups. And we got a few more videos about the big news and the big changes that are going to be happening in the light heavyweight and the heavyweight division. So stay tuned for those. Please keep tapping into these videos. We're going to get a better schedule and a cadence going for how these are going to be churned out. And so I appreciate all your guys' support. I appreciate you guys watching, and MMA Outlaw out.